Nadine Scodro. I'm the Government Affairs Manager at the Chamber, and I'm going to hand it over to Michelle Clemens, who is on our Executive Committee and our Business Works Chairperson. So thank you very much for coming.
Good morning. Thank you for all for coming to the Safety Act update. I'm going to introduce our panelists this morning. We'll start with Bob Berlin. On December 14, 2010, Robert Berlin was appointed DuPage County State's Attorney to complete an unexpired term of Joseph Burkett. In 2012, 2016, and 2020, Mr. Berlin was reelected to full 4-year terms as DuPage County State's Attorney. Bob is up for reelection and is running unopposed both in the primary and the general election at this time. A career prosecutor, Mr. Berlin began his career in 1987 as Assistant State's Attorney in Cook County. During his tenure in Cook County, Mr. Berlin's assignments included criminal appeals, misdemeanor, felony review, homicide, sexual assault, preliminary hearing, child exploitation, and felony trial divisions. In 2001, Mr. Berlin left Cook County State's Attorney's Office, opting to continue his career as first State's Attorney for the Kane County State's Attorney's Office. As first Assistant State's Attorney, Mr. Berlin managed and supervised the entire office staff of more than 140 lawyers and support staff. While in Kane County, Mr. Berlin developed and implemented new policies, including the Community Prosecutions and Felony Review Unit. Mr. Berlin also served as Chief of the Priority Prosecutions Unit. In 2004, he began working for the DuPage County State's Attorney's Office as Deputy Chief of the office's Juvenile Division. During the next several years, Mr. Berlin was promoted to Deputy Chief of the Felony Trial Division, and in April 2010, Chief of the Criminal Bureau, where he supervised all Assistant State's Attorneys charged with criminal prosecution functions of the office. In his 35-year career as prosecutor, Mr. Berlin has tried nearly 90 felony jury trials, 55 of which involve first-degree murder. He's also tried hundreds of felony bench trials, including more than 50 homicide cases. He's a member of the DuPage County Bar Association, as well as DuPage County Felony Investigative Assistance Team. He's a frequent lecturer on a variety of criminal justice issues and has participated in numerous heroin education forums throughout DuPage County. Welcome. Also with us is Chief of Police Jason Arres. He began his career at the Naperville Police Department as a patrol officer in 2001. He served as an undercover detective for the Special Enforcement Unit, a detective in the Intelligence Unit, and a member of the department's Special Response Team and the ILEAS Region 4 Weapons of Mass Destruction Team. Jason has held positions of patrol, canine, and administrative sergeant, as well as patrol and professional standards commander. As deputy chief, he led both the investigations and patrol divisions and oversaw Naperville's public safety answering point dispatch center. He was sworn in as chief of police in Naperville on November 10th, 2021. Chief Arres holds a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from Northern Illinois University and a master's degree in public safety administration from Lewis University. He's also a graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, the Northwestern University Center for Public Safety's School of Police Staff and Command, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police and Leadership in Police Organization School. Thank you both for being here. I'll let you take it over.
Okay, great. Everybody see over? There we go. Okay. So we're gonna save time for questions, but if you have questions along the way, just feel free to raise your hand. What we want to do this morning is talk about the Safety Act, what it is, how it's affected what we're doing, and what the results we have seen so far since it went into effect. Actually, parts of the Safety Act went into effect a couple of years ago, but the cash bail, the elimination of cash bail provision, went into effect this past September 18th. So we're almost at the 6-month, actually today is the 6-month mark, since we've been dealing with it. So the main provisions of the Safety Act, and it was 760 something pages, are police certification, the requirement that all law enforcement officers wear body-worn cameras, the elimination of cash bail, and also changes to the bail statute, especially dealing with defendants who fail to appear in court and how we handle those cases. Prior to September 18th, when we had cash bail, if somebody was out on bail and they did not show up in court, then they didn't show up 30 days later, we could go to the grand jury and get an indictment for violation of bail bond, which would be one class lower than the offense that they were on bond for. So if somebody's on bond for a class 3, they didn't show up in court, we go to the grand jury, we indict them for a class 4, it was a consecutive sentence. That has all been eliminated now. So when someone doesn't show up in court, we can still get a warrant, but when they are arrested, there's no new criminal charge. We still have the ability to ask for a contempt punishment, or the judge can sanction them for up to 30 days. Those are the big differences. And I'm going to let the chief talk about the whole police certification and how that changed law enforcement in the state. That was 140 pages of this bill.
So it's gonna be an 8-hour presentation. You guys haven't locked your day up, so because I'm gonna recite it line for line. No, I'll give you the high level. So in a town like Naperville, where we have a lot more resources than being one of the biggest cities in the state, we have more of a training unit, more robust training unit than a lot of the smaller agencies do. So for us, taking on some of these certification requirements and training requirements that came with that was not a huge lift. But even for us, with these extra resources, it has taxed us in terms of the extra training classes. And more training is good, but there's a ripple effect of how that affects a police department, because that's officers have to come off the street to attend the training. It's backfilling those positions to get that training accomplished, which again, for a larger department, very sustainable. For the smaller departments that don't have the resources we do, it becomes much more difficult, because without, like I said, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but we can facilitate our own training to meet the certifications. You know, I see we have a former chief from Laos. Sorry, I was going to call you out at some point. Ron Wilkie here, who's now with District 204. Tell him like Lyle, it's going to be a little more difficult to do that in-house. And they're going to need to rely on these, we call them mobile training units in Illinois. And then those have limited seats. So all the small departments in the state are fighting for seats in these classes and really needing to figure out how to get. So the idea of training, who'd say that's bad for any profession, let alone policing, but how to facilitate that becomes much, much more difficult. So it's a big training ask, and there wasn't, like a lot of the things, there wasn't a lot of input in the beginning from us. How can we help you facilitate this? And then we're relying on a group called ILETSP, who's the state training board. They're hiring people like in droves to help figure this problem out for the small departments. Again, we'll be okay in this town, but how does the rest of the state? Because there's not a lot of Napervilles or Auroras or Chicago's or Joliet's who can take this on. The other side of certification is the decertification process. And, you know, a line I often use, no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. So they did strengthen decertification laws, which you're not going to hear us complain about at all. So without getting into the weeds, if someone, you know, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and things we see in this profession, even in a wonderful town like Naperville that we're going to live with for a long time, and a lot that we sacrifice in the name of public safety. There's nothing more that we want than somebody that's not doing the job right to get out of the profession and not be able to wear the badge on their chest or the patch on their shoulder. So a lot of decertification stuff in that as well, which again, to me is a good thing. But with Bob, there was still a lot behind the scenes and a lot of the chiefs and sheriffs associations to make sure some of that language was crafted correctly, I guess is the best way to say it. So
yeah, so the police certification part of the law was actually accomplished over the course of 6 months. Our Attorney General, Kwame Raoul, put a group together of state's attorneys, police chiefs, sheriffs, and stakeholders. And we had weekly meetings where we discussed language and we shared language back and forth. And ultimately, there was an agreement on the language for the certification. That was a separate bill. And then at the very end, they made that part of the Safety Act to help get the entire Safety Act passed. So that 140 pages actually that's the way legislation should be passed, because everyone had a say in what the language was going to be. And again, as Chief Arres said, the whole idea is to make sure that the police that are out on the street, they're doing the right thing, they're ethical, and that there's consequences for those who commit serious ethical or legal violations. And that we as state's attorneys find out about it because we have disclosure requirements where we have to let the defense know if some officer is being investigated or some officer has committed some type of misconduct. That's all part of the law. So body-worn cameras was another part of the law, and by 2025, all police departments in the state of Illinois have to be equipped with body-worn cameras. I'm pretty sure that almost all of ours in DuPage are already, and many of them got on board early on. Body-worn cameras are terrific, but this shows you the increase in body-worn camera uploads that we are receiving from police departments throughout the county. It's an enormous increase in evidence. Take a simple DUI case. Prior to body-worn cameras, you're going to get probably a 5-page police report, and you're probably going to get a squad video of the suspect doing field sobriety tests, about maybe a 20-minute video. And that's the entire case. Now, in addition to that 20-minute squad video, and in addition to the 6-page police report, you're going to have body-worn cameras from every officer who was there from start to finish. And we have to watch every single minute to see what was said and what happened. Not just us, but the public defenders and the defense attorneys also have to view it. So what does this mean, this huge increase? It means that we're in the process of hiring many more attorneys. The public defender got approval to hire more attorneys, and it takes the defense bar obviously a lot longer to view all these videos. I'm a huge proponent of body-worn cameras because they make our cases a lot better, and I know the chief will chime in on this. They protect police. When there are complaints against police officers, the chief will tell you, you can go look at the body-worn cameras and see what happened. And fortunately, the overwhelming majority of the time, whatever the officer said is going to be backed up on the body-worn camera. But overall, the cost of implementing the body-worn camera program, of building out a new courtroom for the detention hearings, and the increased personnel to our office and the public defender's office, which then resulted in the public defender needing new space in our building, so they moved up to the 3rd floor, and we had to expand our office, cost the county over $20 million. Fortunately, here in DuPage County, we have a county board that really cares about public safety, and it's a priority. And they came up with that money and spent the money, and we're seeing the results. I don't know if you want to add anything about the cameras.
I would, because first of all, my folks won't go out on the street with these things now. If something was up with the body cam, they don't want to be out there, which is a big change because, you know, in part of the intro you heard I was the administrative sergeant. We were one of the last departments in DuPage County in 2013 to have in-car cameras, and the issues working through that with the union at the time were interesting, to say the least. You know, there was just this big fear. There's always fear from unions that we're going to be like going on fish hunts. Like I have extra hours in my day to just watch video of officers doing things. Now, they loved them. They were fighting for body cams, and they want them on them at all times. Again, they will not want to do business. Now, they're not perfect because a lot of what we review is if we have like a use of force situation that we call a response to resistance. If I'm dealing with Nadine in a close space where we're fighting or struggling, you're not going to get much from that. Oftentimes, we'll jump over to the in-car camera video that if it's on that, will capture the incident occurring much better. So while it's a help, and in a lot of cases will clear us, if it's something in a confined space, everybody's like, oh, that's going to show us. It's not always going to show you that. Bob brought up a great point with the storage. And when we say this, these are not things like we will never and should never do away with these. It's just some of the impact that wasn't thought of. I've already had to hire 2 more people in our records department because the FOIAs have gone up for body cameras. So our state's attorney here brings up a DUI with 6 officers. That's probably for at least 2 60 minutes of video. And to redact that, if we get FOIAs, we have it down to about 7 minutes of redaction time for every minute of body worn camera video. So a 60-minute video is 420 minutes just on one officer's body worn camera. So if you think about, the other, you spoke about the backside with your attorneys, the officers have to watch all that video as they prepare their police reports. So some of the, as great of a tool as they are, there's some unintended consequences that come with that just are changing the way we do business. And I thought there was one other. The only other thing I'll say, and again, I appreciate, and we should all appreciate what we have here and our state's attorney, and I don't have to say that. I don't have to give that plug. But the fighting he did, for us, there was the initial legislation on body worn cameras is that police shall not view their video prior to completing a police report. Naperville Police, we were going to write see body cam video for everything, or maybe it was going to be our sensory observation, smelled alcohol, saw bloodshot, glassy eyes, using the DUI example, but nothing else. And the reason I say that, and I think it's important to know, is under stress, even those trained, military and police I'll use, who receive a lot of stress inoculation training, only recall accurately 65 to 70% of what actually occurred during that event. And that's a high number. We, in a controlled environment, have done trainings at the police department that is training. And we've had times where guys couldn't recall the amount of times, and we want them to strike people. We're training that, not on the street, in training, like where they have to fight for themselves. Can't recall accurately how many strikes they threw, whether that's knee strikes or elbows or something like that. So in a trained, controlled environment, you can't remember that. Could you imagine on the street trying to recall that? So there was a lot of legislation that wasn't good initially around body cameras that brought us a lot of fear, but because we had state's attorneys that saw the same thing and advocating for that side of it really helped. So a lot of work, again, behind the scenes, good intent to have body cams, but unfortunately those conversations were not had before the legislation got pushed, so we had to clean a lot of that up. But love body cams, think they're great. I can't tell you how many complainants come in. Let's say your officer was this, this, and this. I said, and my OPS commander, who's internal affairs, says, sure, great, I got the video pulled up. I didn't see it, but can you show me? And I can't tell you how many times they just get up out of their chair and walk out and don't want to file the complaint anymore because it doesn't match anything that they claimed happened. And that's why my people love this, because they're doing a great job, and this is showing the great job that they're doing. Now, if they don't, it does show the same thing, and there's accountability for that. But I can tell you, like 99% of the time, it absolves police officers of any wrongdoing. So.
I don't know if now's the time to ask questions, but in respect to this conversation, so if someone does a FOIA and they want the body camera footage, do you always send it out, or do you maybe encourage them to come in and watch it with you? What are your options there?
We're trying to work, so I'm going to answer it with what we're trying to do first and then what we're doing. We're trying to get legislation changed because there's a lot of, I call it the TikTok, Insta-Reel crowd that says they're media, and they call themselves media, but they're not media. Listen, if CBS, ABC, NBC, if they want our stuff in FOIA, take it. Like, I'm all in support of the media having it. It's these internet warriors that want to put this stuff out there. We literally had something happen in the downtown around Christmas a couple of years ago that is just getting clicks on social media from, and I forgot the name of the TikTok, what they call it TikTok, but people get a laugh out of it because of how drunk this woman was and the way she was acting. That's a lot of work on us. So we're trying to get legislation passed to really control those types of requests. We can negotiate FOIAs with the folks that send it, but in the long run, especially if they have the media claim, we have to fulfill that FOIA. We'll ask for extensions in time because, as you heard, 420 minutes on one 60-minute video, and that's just one of the all the body cam you'd have to go through for that. So we're trying to get legislation cleaned up. We can negotiate things, but if they say no, I need this, there's not a lot we can do.
What is the validation they require you accept for a media organization? Like, how do they validate they're with the media? What do you have to accept? Is there any?
No, there's no particular credentials at this point, which is part of what we need to clean up in the law. So, yeah.
It's very time consuming. If there are juveniles that are on the body worn camera video, you have to redact their faces out. If there's an informant that's on the video, that all has to be redacted. The other portion of this is we have a system called TechShare for prosecutors, and that's our case management system. So the police take these body-worn cameras and they upload them into TechShare, where we then can access them. Every defense attorney has a code, and when they come in and file an appearance on a case, they're able to go in and access the videos. And we are, as prosecutors, we're able to watch these videos on our cell phones, on our laptops at home, or at work. But they obviously take up a tremendous amount of storage, so we've had to increase our cloud storage. But the system overall, for the number of videos we're getting, seems to be working pretty well. All right, so let's talk about the Pretrial Fairness Act, because this is the biggest part of the Safety Act and what really got all the media and public's attention. The original version of the Safety Act, if you recall, had significant flaws to it. And many of us on the prosecution side were very vocal about the problems. It was the last part of the law to be fixed, and it really got fixed in the 11th hour in late 2022 in the waning days of the session in Springfield. There was an amendment that got passed, House Bill 1095, that significantly changed the law and made it a lot better. Didn't make it perfect, but made it a lot better. There were 3 state's attorneys that were assigned to this group to work with the General Assembly to fix it. I was one of them. The Kane County State's Attorney Jamie Mosser was another one, and the Champaign County State's Attorney Julia Reitz. We worked over the course of 3 months and came up with a lot of the changes, which I'm just going to go through briefly so everyone understands how this works. In order to, judges have 3 options when somebody's charged with a crime. If the state is seeking detention, we file a petition. And a judge can detain them, they can release them, or they can release them with conditions. Under the original version of the act, up on top, the only way judges could detain someone is if they posed a specific real and present threat to a person. So if a person walks into the 7-Eleven, doesn't know anyone in there, and robs the clerk at gunpoint, how are we going to show that that defendant was a real and present threat to that individual? It'd be very hard to do. We were able to change the standard to a real and present threat to the safety of any person, persons, or the community. That was one of the most significant changes in the law, which has helped judges detain violent offenders because it's easy for us to show that they're a threat to the community. Okay, the crimes on the left, under the original version of the law, those could not be detained under a dangerousness standard. You can be detained under 2 ways: if you're a danger to the community or if you're a willful flight risk. The crimes on the left, originally, even if someone was a danger to the community, they could not be detained. But now all of those crimes listed on the right, after House Bill 1095 was passed, judges can detain if they're a flight risk or if they're a risk to the community. And many of those are serious crimes.
I think you really need to absorb the work that Bob and his partners did here, because if you look at what's on this left, that's super concerning. I mean, this was passed by folks that we all vote for in the state, all of these would not have been detainable. So from, you all charged me with keeping this community safe. This would have been a huge issue for us if these folks, in these types of cases, weren't going to be held, if you think about that. So he won't plug himself on this, but I do appreciate the work of those 3 state's attorneys. There was a lot of work that went in to get these added. So greatly appreciate that, Bob.
Thank you. Okay, so we talk about flight risk. What does it mean? Because judges can detain on felonies other than class 4 felonies if someone is a willful flight risk. This was the original Safety Act language, that we would have to show that they didn't show up in court because they were intentionally evading prosecution by concealing themselves. So what does that mean? Concealing themselves means they're hiding somewhere. And someone who had missed court, let's say 20 times in the past, we would have a record of that. Judges could not consider that. Here's the new definition. And this is in the law right now, where it's conduct with a purpose to thwart the judicial process to avoid prosecution. A much easier standard to show. And reoccurrence and patterns of conduct where someone hasn't shown up in court before can now be considered by judges if someone is trying to evade prosecution and they're a willful flight risk. So again, it's a much broader definition to help judges use their discretion. We accomplished a lot when we changed the law, but we didn't get everything we asked for. And these offenses here are very concerning, and they're really very concerning for small businesses. These are crimes: burglary, retail theft, organized retail crime, possession of a stolen motor vehicle, where even if someone is a danger to the community, they cannot be detained unless they're a willful flight risk. So, these people, we see it a lot in Chicago, and I know you've seen it here in Naperville, the crash and grab burglaries. They drive the car right into the business, clean the business out, and take off. Usually it's a stolen car, right? Even if they're caught, those are not detainable unless we can show they're a flight risk. And many of those offenders really are a threat to the community. And this is something that continues to bother me and other state's attorneys throughout the state. I don't know if you want to talk about this.
Obviously, no, I think what I want to talk about is how you guys have got creative, because correct me if I'm wrong, but if they flee when we catch them in these crimes, you've used that to detain them. So by fleeing, we do catch people in the act, not all the time. That sometimes takes the back end, but especially the retail theft side and the possession of a stolen motor vehicle, and fleeing and eluding are a huge problem. And that means we turn our lights on and people take off and don't stop for us. And Bob puts out press release after press release after press release when that's involved. So they got creative in DuPage. So when we do catch someone committing one of these crimes and they do flee from us and they do get caught, he's using the flight risk, using that piece of the fleeing as the flight risk, because if they're not stopping initially for police, that's the creative way to hold these folks. Absent that, if they're not fleeing from us, we can't hold them. Hinsdale's that was one of the, right after the cash bail went away, Hinsdale had a jewelry store burglary.
Right.
5, 6 people went in, they caught one of them who had a long, I don't want to.
Sledgehammer.
But the guy you caught had a huge criminal history, if I remember.
Yes. He went in using a sledgehammer, they broke the window. It's all on video. Yep. And the judge in first appearance court was very frustrated. He stated on the record that I find you're a threat to the community, but under the law, I have no choice but to release you. So I'll get to it later on, some of the changes that we're talking about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in New Jersey. Because if Illinois just would have replicated what they did in New Jersey, we'd be a lot safer. So, okay, how does it work? For many of your lower offenses, your misdemeanors, many of your class 3 and 4 offenses that are not detainable, When the police arrest them, they can release them and give them a court date. And they don't go to first appearance court.
Which is a change.
And that's a big change, right? In the past, with cash bail, everyone would go to court for a bond hearing. So the police use their discretion. Even if someone is detainable, they can use their discretion and release them. Now, we have a felony review unit, and anytime the police are looking to charge someone with a felony, they have to screen it with our state's attorneys who are on call 24/7. When we screen those cases, we have a conversation with the police. Should we seek detention or not? And if we decide we're going to seek detention, Chief Arres and his officers have to bring those offenders over to the county jail, and they're going to appear in court the very next day. And there's court going on pretty much all day long. They start at 8 in the morning and they go all the way till, most days till 3 or 4 o'clock.
My folks want everybody detained, as you would expect from a police department. So that's where Bob's folks are helpful. Like, hey, we want to detain him too, but we can't based on these circumstances.
So a judge cannot detain someone, even if they're charged with a triple murder, unless the state's attorney files a petition. I can tell you that in this county, we file petitions on almost every eligible case, unless there's a reason not to. We review every case on a case-by-case basis, but we file a lot of petitions. And I know that's not the case in every single county. And I won't talk about the county by the lake and their philosophy. But when we file a petition, there's things that we have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence. And that is, first of all, the proof is evident, the presumption great, that the offender has committed the offense. Secondly, that they pose a real and present threat to the safety of any person, persons, or the community. And third, that there's no conditions or combination of conditions that can mitigate that threat, such as electronic monitoring or home confinement. The judge has to make a determination that that's not good enough to keep the community safe. And if we're able to prove all that, then a judge issues an order for detention, which then has to be reviewed every single court date by the trial judge. These hearings almost always are done by way of proffer. And what that means is the attorneys just make arguments in front of the judge. So we'll present the judge what the case is, what it's all about, all the facts. We get the offender's criminal history. We present that to the judge, and we'll do that on with a very short time frame. So if somebody gets arrested for a robbery at 3 in the morning, charges are approved, they're going to be in court 5 hours later. So my attorneys are getting to court at 6:30 in the morning. They're getting the criminal histories and actually the petitions. The felony screening assistant who approves the charge in the middle of the night is starting the petition. And then those attorneys in the first appearance courtroom complete the petition. We get it on file and we're doing the hearing later that morning. That's how quickly we're doing these. And the system's actually working very well here in this county. Our public defenders are very well prepared, and they're contested hearings, and the judge makes detailed findings in each individual case.
What
Yeah.
about on the weekends, Saturdays or Sundays?
Same thing, business as usual, 7 days a week, even on holidays. We have court. Smaller counties downstate are proceeding by way of video. And that was a very late change to the law. Actually, that was the Supreme Court issued a rule to allow for video appearances to accommodate the small counties. Some counties downstate only have a judge 1 day a week. So if somebody got arrested on a retail theft and the state was seeking detention, that person might sit for 5 or 6 days before they even had a hearing. They do those hearings now by way of video, but we're in court 7 days a week. Okay, So these statistics are from September 18th through January 17th, so the first 4 months. And you can see that on the real serious charges, we're batting 100%. Murder, attempt murder, armed robberies, carjackings, home invasion, criminal sexual assault, hate crime, armed habitual criminal, threatening a public official. Every single case has resulted in detention. This is where the law is working incredibly well. In the past, when we had cash bond, we did have cases where bonds would be set at $3 million. And we saw defendants actually post $300,000 and get out. It was happening. And there were groups actually out of Chicago who were well-funded, and they would go around posting bond money for defendants charged with crimes. So the good part of this law is that's no longer the case. If a judge finds that we've proven they're a threat to the community, they're dangerous, they stay in and they do not have the ability to get out. Here's where we're seeing problems with the law. And look down at the bottom there for the numbers on retail theft, identity theft, and burglaries. Retail theft, identity theft were 0 out of 28. In most of those cases, we won't ask for detention because we just don't have an argument that they're a flight risk. Because remember, they can't be held even if they're a danger to the community. Residential burglary, that's 33%. You see the numbers on fleeing and eluding. So 13 have been detained, 14 were released. That's actually pretty good. And what we're finding is if it's 3 in the morning and there's no traffic, there's no pedestrians, it's a lot tougher for us to prove. But if it's 3 in the afternoon and someone's going 60 miles an hour, down Naperville Road, where there's a lot of cars and a lot of traffic out, our judges are detaining those defendants, finding that they're a threat to the community. The biggest numbers, obviously, are with the domestics, and that was a big change in the law. Most of your domestic batteries are misdemeanors. Those would always result in some type of a cash bond, and most of those defendants were getting out. Now, we're seeking detention on most domestic batteries. And you can see 100 out of 177 detention petitions, 71 have been granted. That's actually pretty good. So that's another benefit of this law is those defendants in the past would get out on bond. And the ones where we're able to convince a judge, look, you let this person out, there's a good chance that they're going to re-victimize our victim and do something more serious, judge has the ability to detain. So, again, the idea was to make sure the violent offenders were being detained pre-trial. That's happening. But we are seeing a lot of other offenders, unfortunately, some of them who, in my opinion, and in our judge's opinion, should be detained, are getting out. So here's the totals for the first 4 months. 47% of our petitions have been granted. Now, that percentage compared to the rest of the state is actually lower. I think the state average was about 65%. The reason for that is we file so many petitions here at DuPage. This proves that what I said all along is give judges discretion. I firmly believe that a judge is in the best position to make a decision if someone's a threat to the community on detention, not the General Assembly. And I'll get to New Jersey in a second because New Jersey gives their judges a lot more discretion. And this proves that judges are, in fact, using their discretion because 53% of our petitions have resulted in release, most of them getting released with conditions. But you see the largest percentage, again, are for your domestic batteries. All right, so what about failures to appear? And I actually just calculated all these numbers over the weekend. These go through February 29th, so about the first 23 and a half weeks. And these are the number, not the number of failures to appear, but the number of outstanding warrants. So somebody fails to appear, almost all the time it's going to result in a warrant. In many cases, they get rearrested, and then the warrant will be served, or the police actually have to go out and locate them, and they're arrested on the warrant. These are outstanding warrants. And you see, there's 193 felony cases. People haven't shown up in court, and there's warrants outstanding. And the biggest number is in your major traffic. You're driving while license suspended, driving while license revoked. We see a huge number of those defendants that just don't show up in court. So doing the math, these are the projections based on the first 23 and a half weeks. That after a year of this law, these are the percentages we see. And look at that felonies, it's about 85.5% of defendants will have appeared in court. The other 14.5%, there's going to be warrants outstanding. Now, there are some who believe that that's a success. I don't. Okay, 15% felony cases where we're not able to prosecute defendants, to me, that is a failure in this law. And it can't be fixed. And I'm going to go through that in a second with recommendations for what we can do to make that better. But I know that even when we had cash bail, Cook County, for the large part, their judges were setting, they were releasing defendants with conditions, and they weren't setting cash bonds even when we had cash bond. And their statistics showed about an 85% success rate. They considered that a success. We charge about 2,800 or 2,900 felonies a year. And if over 400 of them result in warrants for failure to appear in court, I don't think we're doing a service to the community. So we've got to talk about appeals first. Either side can appeal. So if somebody's detained, the defense can file an appeal. If they're not detained, the state has the ability to file an appeal. Here in DuPage, there have only been 72 appeals as of March 12th. That's actually a rather low number compared to the rest of the state. All 72 of those were filed by defendants. We only have one state appeal pending, and that's actually an appeal of the appellate court. It was a shooting at the Yorktown Mall where the driver of the car, the defendant, was actually leaning out the passenger side shooting at someone in the middle of the day at Yorktown Mall, and the driver was also detained. The appellate court reversed our judge and released him. We're appealing that to the Supreme Court. That's the only state appeal we've had. The other 72 have been filed by the defense, but you can see the huge increase in appeals statewide. So much so that Chief Justice Tice just recently said she called it a breathtaking increase in the number of appeals, which all the data showed out in New Jersey that this was going to happen. New Jersey eliminated cash bail in 2017. In the first year, they had a huge increase in the number of appeals. Each year, it's gone down as that body of case law has been developed. And here's a quote from a recent opinion that just came out last week. This defendant was charged with drug-induced homicide, armed habitual criminal, and possession of a controlled substance with intent to deliver. He was detained. He appealed it. And here's what the appellate court said. They upheld the trial judge detaining the defendant, and they stated right in their opinion that the law gave circuit courts the ability to consider the specific facts and circumstances of the case through the lens of a non-existent list of factors to determine whether a defendant was a danger, posed a danger to the community. By and large, the appellate courts are affirming our judges and affirming their discretion in these cases, which is very good. That's what we asked for from the beginning. So it's actually good what we're seeing at the appellate level. All right, so what can we do? How can we fix this law to make it better? And this is where it's really important because everyone here in this room has a say. You all know who your state representatives and state senators are. We are pushing for greater discretion. New Jersey eliminated cash bond in 2017, but unlike Illinois, in every felony case, the judges in New Jersey have the ability to detain if that person's a threat to the community, if they're likely to flee, if they're likely to threaten witnesses or intimidate witnesses or obstruct justice. As a result, in 2017, the first year after, or the first year of elimination of cash bail, 89.4% of defendants in New Jersey showed up in court. That's higher than what our projection is. It's about 5 percentage points higher. That's significant. And actually, last year, New Jersey actually changed their law again. I think it was closer to 97%. New Jersey amended their law in 2022, and now for certain gun crimes, there's actually a presumption of detention. So you commit a carjacking in New Jersey with a gun, there's a presumption of detention. In Illinois, it's still a presumption of release. Here's the amazing thing about what happened in New Jersey in 2022. That amendment to the law passed their Senate 35-1 and passed their House 69-8 with one abstaining. That is overwhelming bipartisan support. And unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that in Illinois. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. Because when it comes to public safety, we should see a lot more bipartisanship. Yeah.
When it seems so obvious what New Jersey is doing, why is Illinois not just?
Great. That's a great question. I ask it all the time. We're trying. We are trying. We've given the General Assembly language for fixes that we would like to see, and we use New Jersey as an example. Their violent crime has not gone up significantly at all. So they've really been the model. And that's what we're hoping that we can get. It's really not that complicated, but it comes down to more discretion.
Jenny, you bring up a good point that I think I'd like you to push on a little because it's tough. I know what you're saying, but for the group, the presumption is on the defendant in New Jersey, whereas our state's attorney and his assistants, the work is put on them when someone is arrested to prove that someone needs to be detained. Someone that just committed one of those qualifying crimes, they still have a lot of extra work to do to say we need to detain him or her because this, which seems backwards that we're putting more on prosecutors and law enforcement to come up with the speaking points as opposed to the defense, who should be saying my client should be released because of this. And then obviously they would counter. So it's a 180 of how to do things. There's more work on the prosecution. Not that there wouldn't be work for us. We would obviously do similar things, but it's that presumption of, and you said that, should be released, where we have to work to say they shouldn't. So just simple things like that, I think that goes over unless you understand that part.
There is a concern, I've heard it, and that is, well, too many people will be detained pre-trial. And my response to that is, look, we want the right people detained pretrial. If a defendant is not a risk to the community and they're likely to appear in court, they should be released. And by and large, they're showing up in court. That's the way the law should work. But if someone is a danger to the community, there's a cost if they commit another crime. Yeah.
Vote in November, is there a way to learn like which candidates would be more pro these rules as opposed to which candidates maybe pass the original versions?
So everyone running for state rep or state senate, they've got websites. Go to their websites, look at what they stand for. Look at, the Daily Herald endorses candidates, and they give summaries of their positions, or call their campaign or email the campaign and ask them where they stand on some of these issues. You want to be as informed as you can, obviously, when you're voting. I put in the last bullet point, the social cost of crime. And that is something that not a lot of our legislators talk about. They talk about the cost of police, they talk the cost of courtrooms, the cost of incarceration. And those are significant costs. The largest part of the county's budget is the jail and the sheriff's office. But there's a reason for that, because public safety is so important. What happens if there's a house on your block that gets broken into in the middle of the day? What does that do to the entire neighborhood? People are afraid, right? What's the dollar value that you put in that? That's the social cost of crime. When people are afraid. When you leave your house in the morning, like many communities in Chicago, when people leave their house, they're looking over their shoulder to see if there's someone ready to carjack them or rob them at gunpoint. And no one should have to live like that. That's the social cost of crime. And it's very hard to put a dollar value on it, but there are studies out there, and studies that I have used to demonstrate that the cost of crime far outweighs the cost of the criminal justice system and the cost of punishment. And there's no question in my mind that when you hold offenders accountable and there are consequences for their behavior, we reduce crime. We're never going to eliminate it, right? People are always going to commit crime. But what we have seen time and time again, and I know the chief agrees with me on this, in this county, we have a reputation. We're very fair, and we give people a second chance when they deserve it. We have great restorative justice programs, but when you commit a violent crime, we have a reputation for being tough. And the result of that is a reduction in crime. So here's the last slide. I put this in here just to demonstrate some of the trends that we're seeing. Look at the burglaries. One of the reasons for the huge increase in burglary is some of those are retail thefts. But the Illinois Supreme Court has held that if someone goes into a store with the intent to steal, so they're going in with a theft detection device or a foil-lined bag, that is a burglary. Because even though the store is open to the public, there's a what's called the limited authority doctrine. They don't have authority to go in and steal. We charge them as burglaries if we can prove that. And that's one of the reasons you see a huge increase. The good news here is look at the number of vehicular hijackings and armed robberies, and those numbers have gone down after we saw an increase during the COVID years. That's because of enforcement. And that's because those defendants are being detained, they're being convicted, and they're getting significant sentences. The UUW stands for unlawful use of weapon by a felon. If you're a convicted felon, you cannot possess a gun in the state of Illinois. And look at the increase that we saw since 2019. And I don't know if you want to chime in.
I
on
do,
this.
and I think that unlawful use sounds like that means somebody's pulling a trigger. That's literally just having the gun in their possession. Not that that's much better, because that's still only a 1/4 inch motor reflex movement from a shooting happening. But I do want to say something, and this is where it's good and bad. The good I'm going to say is be proud of your police officers in this town, because the bulk of these are proactive police work. It's not responding to a call and finding that. DuPage County has proactive cops. I don't know if I want to take credit, but I would bet 90% of these are Naperville.
A lot of them are neighborhood.
Yeah, I know our numbers, and I'm pretty sure we're about 90% of 2022 in there. And that's just, we have folks that care about protecting you all, that care about protecting your business. And at a time where not all cops are willing to go out there and be proactive because they feel like they're being, I don't know, that they have a target on them more than they have in the past, your cops in this town are doing that. So I like to say great, but it also concerns me greatly, as like I said, as the chief protector of this town, that this many gun cases are coming into our city and our county, just as much as the next slide that I'm sure you're going to touch on.
Yeah, so this is the next slide. Well, actually, the bottom number is really this is a trend that is incredibly disturbing, and it is making our communities far less safe. We have seen an enormous increase in people who just don't stop for the police, or they stop, officer goes up to the car, and they take off at a high rate of speed. And it's dangerous. Many of these have resulted in chases. Sometimes if one of the helicopters is up, whether it's Chicago Police or the Cook County Sheriff or Homeland Security, our officers on the ground are able to communicate with the helicopters, and they're actually able to follow the vehicle as it's traveling along the highways. And we catch a lot of those offenders, and we seek detention on those cases. These, they're dangerous, but to just let them go, to me, is the wrong way of going about it. Sometimes, for safety reasons, obviously, that has to happen.
And the law. I mean, here's the deal. Most police departments in the state will only chase forcible felonies. So think of your burglaries, your shootings, robberies, vehicular hijackings, things of that nature, because those are serious violent crimes. Those folks, burglaries, I still am blown away that like business burglaries aren't detainable, because somebody is violating someone's space, albeit in a business or in their home. We will chase for those things. But we had 110 last year, which was actually down. Many of those we see a traffic violation. We don't know what's going on, and people take off. This isn't, hey, we just had a burglary and we found the car. It's somebody speeding, or somebody's weaving in and out of traffic, like maybe they're a DUI, maybe they're only texting and driving, and they take off. And now we don't chase in a lot of those cases absent a forcible felony, because I'll tell you right now, if there's a crash, first of all, it endangers the motoring public. It's not like when a car takes off, you're like, oh wait, that's a red light. Let me stop real quick, and then I'll go. They blow red lights at full rates of speed, which could endanger you and your families who are out and about driving. They don't care what's out there. They're trying to get away from us. And the unfortunate side of that is, first of all, a family could be affected and ruined. Second part of that, and I hate to talk about it, but the liability is on us. Police get sued, cities get sued, and unless it's a serious crime, I hate calling it winning or losing, it's the best adjective, we lose. And our officers are potentially held accountable personally civilly, for what some courts will have called willful and wanton. And there's no clear, hey, this one was okay to chase and this one wasn't by judges. They're very inconsistent on their rulings with fleeing and eluding. So we have to be ultra careful. I always say, like, as a chief, you're protecting your officers from themselves in some ways, because all of us want to catch the bad guy or the bad girl, I always say. We always want to, but we have to put restrictions in place that protect them from themselves, because bad things happen not only to our community with crashes, but could happen to them civilly as well. So it doesn't feel good to let them go. And I will tell you, just one example, we had a car take off from us from the area 88 and 59. We have a couple former folks that have lateraled from Chicago. They use their connections, found the car, guns and drugs in the car. So they're not just taking off for us to joyride. And they're not stolen motor vehicles. They are taken off of us because they're concealing something or hiding something in there. So that's that risk. We're like, oh, hey, they're probably taking off with something in the car. Shouldn't you chase them? We don't know that at the time, you know? So it's such a difficult proposition. Yes.
Have you seen these numbers be adjusted since the Naperville ordinance with the fine?
So what Kaylin's referencing is, and we had great support from city council on this, we actually we fine the registered owner of a vehicle $900. That was the cost, because we review all these flings. So it's I always get the fee and fine. DeSanto, our attorney, will get mad if I don't say it right.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a recoup of the police resources that go into reviewing all these, right? So it's $900. I can't speak to that reduction. We had less traffic stops last year, which could also be the reason for less fleeings. And I don't even know if we're at a 30% clip. It's going to shock you that the criminals that are fleeing from us aren't always paying their $900 fine. So, but it was an outside the box way of trying. And I will say we're having some really good conversation right now about increasing penalties. Harry Benton out of Plainfield has started to introduce some, we're looking for more accountability. Right now, it's very difficult. I turn my lights on. If anybody ever has come on a ride along and you're behind a car, whether it's day or night, you have no idea who the driver of that vehicle is. We don't have a good means to hold someone accountable that takes off from us, because and we will follow up on these. Let's say I go knock on your door because the car is registered to you. And when they say, hey, I got nothing to say, I don't know who is driving my car. There's no criminal case there. I can't just say there's not an assumption that the driver was the registered owner. We have to, because all of us have lent our cars to friends or let other people borrow our vehicles. And so I get it. We can't say a vehicle registered to Bob Berlin that took off from us, we're going to arrest him for that. We have to prove that like any other crime. So we've looked for moving it to a felony. Number one, more accountability. If we do catch the person, let's hold them accountable more. And that felony opens up the ability for us to seize that vehicle. So regardless of whether we can catch the person or not, now most registered owners know who had their car, and if vehicle seizure is on the line, maybe they cooperate and say, hey, you know what? It was John Doe driving my car. We still have a case to work from there, but now it's a lead we will never have on a fleeing case unless we have the right in our department policy to chase them and potentially catch them. I think I covered this. Does that make sense to everyone? Everybody track them? Anything I missed that you can think of on that?
No.
So it's very, very big. And our, like I said, 106, many of these, 106 of those 397s, almost a third are Naperville.
It is a real problem. And every police department has a different policy. Some police departments will chase, others just don't.
We're in the middle.
And yeah.
And I've actually talked to some of the chiefs, because there's some newer chiefs that are just taking the restrictions off their policies. And I try to help your peers out, like understand the unintended consequences of that. We're looking for extra tools. I just bought a case that shoots out spike strips and blows people's tires out if they take off from us. So we're trying to strategically set those up in different areas of town. Because I can tell you, our biggest fleeing locations in Naperville, 88 and 59 and eastbound 75th. Folks are jumping on 88, folks are heading to 355. That is our two biggest data points. I'm working with Axon, who's a company out there. I'd love to be able to install a device that's automatic that shoots these spike strips out when someone's fleeing from us. Because there's been too many cops. There's hand deployable spike strips, way too dangerous. There have been police officers that have been run over and killed trying to deploy those. I want it to be automated. I don't want that human factor in there. But it's forcing us to change the way we're doing business and figure out other ways to mitigate these before they become a bigger problem.
But even the spike strips don't stop the car.
No, we just
slow it down.
We just had a car drive on 2 or 3 wheels all the way from our town. We did chase this car from our town to DeKalb on 2 or 3 wheels. So, yeah.
One of our biggest concerns, even out in Will County, you mentioned the cost, Bob, and there's the mental health and the physical health, the well-being of our first responders and our law enforcement. Growing concern in many ways, a frustration that I have and many of my neighbors have is when you're on the road and you see first responders or law enforcement going to a call with their lights on and nobody pulls over. people just keep, or they race to outrun them. Is there any way to address this? Because you just, it could be your loved one in the ambulance, it could be, your loved one in that patrol car. And I love the Naper Notifies, but is there a way to put out there maybe an educational summary? Here's your friendly reminder, when you see the lights, please pull over.
I can take it over. That's not a bad idea. It's the same.
Yeah.
I believe that part of driver education now, part of the Secretary of State class, is what to do in a traffic stop, and obviously pulling over. It's just, it's
Well, I think what
seeing a lack of
actually
respect.
happens might be different. Two of my sons did their driver's studies with the school. The third one, we did a private school, and there were a lot of things we went out and did with him ourselves because they weren't addressed. So that's one of my biggest concerns, growing all the time, and we want to be proactive for you, so.
Thank you guys both for being here. This is a great update. As Chief Arres knows, I also run the Convention and Visitors Bureau for the city of Naperville. Trespassing. I know this has been, when Safety Act first came up, store owners who have people who are kind of wandering around, they can't remove them. We have people staying in hotels who are not paying, and this is even before 30 days, but they're the hotels are trying to get them removed, and there seems to be pretty limited what people can do on trespassing. Is there any update on that?
Can I start and you can
Go
follow
ahead.
it? So I'll give you a real world example. So what Christine is bringing up that we didn't hit on today because there's just, like I said, we could be here for a while. Class B and C misdemeanors, many of which are lesser offenses, were decriminalized with the Safety Act. And by decriminalize, I mean we can't initially arrest someone right when we show up to that crime that's being committed. Some, like I said, are very petty and low in offense, but there's unintended consequences that came with that. And trespassing is one of them. So we can arrest on trespass, but we had Lou Malnati's recently had an issue with a gentleman in there creating a disturbance. There's a cadence we have to follow now. And again, I'll tell you, the bulk of trespasses, we have officers that are great de-escalators and can talk people out of a situation when they're trespassing that rarely result in even a ticket or an arrest there. But there's times where we need that tool. That's what I look at the laws, different tools in your toolbox. Voluntary compliance is what my people want in all cases, but it's not always there. And this is the example. So now we go in there, we try to get this gentleman to leave who's sitting at the bar, creates a major issue. Before we can put hands on, get him out of there, we have to now issue a citation for trespassing, which I'm sure that, makes it already, you guys all know, what does that do to an angry person? Makes them angrier. And now you give the ticket, and now when there's a lack of compliance after the ticket, now we can move to arrest. So now we've really upset them even more than they already were. Because again, most people, the police show up, hey, Lou Malnati's wants you to leave. He had already taken care of his check, but didn't want to leave. And we tried to talk about it. I watched the whole thing unfolded on body cam. And next thing you know, my people are fighting with a guy on the floor of Lou Malnati's because he wouldn't come out. And they told him he's under arrest because he wouldn't comply. So there's steps we can take to get there, but for the people that need to go, they need to go. Once you're not getting, like I said, we don't walk into these businesses saying, hey, they want you to go, you're under arrest. We build it up way more and really try to get that compliance out of there. That's what we did pre all this. Like I said, just because we could arrest people didn't mean we were, but the unintended consequences it creates, I won't tell you, the hotel thing gets messy, but just for the business, for you business owners, if you're wondering like, hey, I called these cops, why aren't they arresting this guy and getting him out of here? We cannot. If it's just for the trespass, we cannot.
So the original Safety Act for criminal trespassing in all Class B and C misdemeanors, unless the person was an obvious threat to the community, the police could never arrest. We were able to change that in House Bill 1095, where the police have to write the ticket, but if the behavior persists, then they can make the arrest. So as Chief Arres just said, tell the person to leave. They don't leave, you write them a citation. They still won't leave. Now the officer can arrest, but understand they will be released from court. But at least you remove them from the situation, and oftentimes
An obvious
It
threat
solves the
worries us
problem.
because that's a very broad definition, because an obvious threat to us is going to be different than an obvious threat to someone else. So we don't, not everything can be perfectly black and white, but when something's that open to interpretation and it involves us taking someone's freedom away, you know, when you arrest someone, you're taking their freedom of movement away, where there's constitutional issues that get involved. If a judge interpreted that specific thing as a different threat than our officers did, who were in the heat of a moment, that wasn't a good spot. So we got to a better spot.
Right.
But I think there needs to be, like, that would be one I still would like to be changed back. Because there's quite a few in the BNCs. Again, you'd look at them like me, and you'd be like, I get it. Is there a way where maybe we don't need to arrest on these and cite a state cite or something maybe lower than a C? But there's some where you'd be like, oh, wait, the police should have the discretion to make an immediate arrest based on that crime. But we've lost that, at least for now.
Other questions?
I have a question. So going back to that failure to appear where you have 14% of people charged with a felony that don't show up for their court date. I mean, I'm assuming the police don't have the resources to go out and look for all those people. I mean, are you hoping you come in contact with that person again and then at that time you realize they have a warrant? Or
Well, I mean, the key
otherwise
is,
they're out on the street, right?
what if it's someone from Springfield, Illinois? Because there are folks that come up and visit, you know, Naperville or wherever, have family up here. To your point, no, we're not driving down to Springfield, and no police department has the resources to just, what you're talking about is like a warrant team. So no, we don't have that. Now, with enough police contacts, it's interesting how the folks that get in trouble generally pop onto our radar again. If you think about your own police contacts, it's probably only maybe with a traffic infraction, although I'm sure there's all good drivers here. But, you know, it's interesting how those that get held accountable for certain crimes pop up. So whether that's on a traffic stop, that person's driving a car and we find the warrant. But yeah, no, we do not have a warrant team that goes out to that. Unless it's something serious, Ron. In that case, if it's a very violent crime, we'll make an effort to look for that person.
Oftentimes, they're getting arrested for another crime. And that's how the police find out there's a warrant. If the chief brought up the instance where someone's arrested on a warrant from another county, the police have 5 days to go to that other county and pick that person up to bring them back. And if they don't go within 5 days, a judge has to release them with conditions. One of the other anomalies of the law is, let's say somebody commits a burglary, they're released. They commit another burglary. On the new burglary, it's not detainable, right, unless they're a flight risk. So they're going to get conditions again, but on the original case, a judge can now detain them because they violated the conditions. So on the new case, they get conditions, then we send them back to the original judge, and that judge will detain them. That's kind of how it's working. It really doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But that's just one of the anomalies with the law. Yeah.
I'm wondering if advancing technology can help, especially with things like fleeing and chasing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you talked about a helicopter earlier. How many small police departments?
You want to help me get one for Naperville?
But I'm thinking that drones are, and it's cheap, but drones can track, drones can record,
So we're looking
drones
at
can
it.
follow, relatively cheaply and very effectively.
So the drones we use based on the conditions are more in the neighborhood of $25,000 a pound. We have 6 drones in the police department, but there's also restrictions on how we use those, and understandably so. That technology isn't quite there. I was just at a CEO summit for like a think tank. Chiefs got together for law enforcement problems from across the country, and it was, hey, what can we help develop for you? And I would love for my people just to be able to put a puck on a car that's like a tracker for a drone, and if someone takes off, the drone releases, follows the car, and does that for us. So companies are looking at ways to leverage technology. I mean, we have quite a few license plate readers in this town right now, and I know that's a scary word for some, but license plate readers in a city with strong policy are a good thing. I will just tell you, in my 23 years here, a highway is always going to bring crime potentially, right? It's an easy hit to come up. That there was a gas station, if you remember, at Deal in 59 that was one of our regular ones that would see armed robberies occur because you could jump off the highway, commit your robbery, and jump on. Well, somebody that's the victim of a robbery doesn't like do what I would want to do. Let me get that license plate as someone just pointed a gun in my face and took off. Now, license plate readers, we have one near 88 and 59. So if the person that just committed that crime goes northbound on 59 towards the highway, we now have a lead we would have never had just because of a technology. So I'm trying to give you specific, but the flip side, people are like, well, can't you just look at everywhere Bob Berlin's been in Naperville because you have license plate readers? We could. First of all, we don't have the time to be just searching people's plates. Second of all, I have a strong policy that says you cannot look for someone's plate unless it's attached to a crime and there's a report number that must be, not should, shall be entered into the database that you were searching that plate. And if not, there's some serious accountability for that because it's a powerful tool. Powerful tools like that need heavy control over them. So I know that got to a long-winded technology. It's out there. Companies are trying to work towards that. We play catch up. We catch the criminal in whatever that crime that was being committed, and then they find a way around it, and it's literally that game, cat and mouse. Somebody adjusts. Does that help? Answer? Yeah. I really would love a helicopter.
The reason
but I
I
can't
ask
justify it.
is, it seems to me that since the pandemic, road behavior has become completely egregious. I'm much more likely to be killed or seriously injured in a traffic accident now than being shot. I know a lot of it happens on the highways, and that's not your responsibility, but it seems like everybody since the pandemic has decided that roads are for somebody else and not for me. And I mean, it's almost like, have the sheriffs and has those who patrol the highways given up on trying to catch people?
They're trying.
Yeah, the state police, they've got the entire state to cover.
I know.
The state police, they do chase. And how many cases have we seen out of Chicago where the Chicago police cannot, their sergeant calls off a chase, but then the state police will see the car and they'll pick it up and they'll chase after them.
What's going to blow your mind is I thought crashes would be up since the pandemic. We're not even close to our 2019 levels of crashes. I think we're more aware and there's more info out there. Like I had we in Naperville had 600 less crashes in 2023 than we did in 2022. And 2022 still wasn't pre-COVID levels. I think, and because my cops feel like they're more busy than they've ever been in their careers right now. And the data's not showing that at all. That's that math nerd you guys saw, my math degree. I'm big in numbers because it takes emotion out of everything. Numbers don't lie. And we're going to less calls, but what COVID did, everyone, it slowed everything down. Cars came off the road. There wasn't a lot of activity, and it created this new false sense of what work was. And I'll just speak for policing. I can't speak for other industries. And then as we came out of the pandemic, we were so used to a different type of level of what work or calls to us. When it did come back, and it still isn't back to pre-COVID levels for us, even just for calls for service that we respond to, it reset that barometer. I think in a lot of our heads. Just Naperville, yeah.
Nationally.
Yeah, nationally, which is interesting because crashes are up nationally.
First off, thanks to both of you. Especially thank you. I get the county updates with detention hearing results and everything, and more power to you. And I'm saying that as an attorney who's done defense work. So first and foremost, though, I'm a citizen. I've got a family, and thanks to, like I said, to both of you for keeping us safe, especially from the guy who was going 55 probably on Naper this morning, south of 75th, and leaving in out of traffic so timely.
Speed cameras, so push legislation for speed cameras, because only Chicago can get speed cameras right now. We can't. And I don't have enough cops to cover it, so sorry.
Is either one of you aware of any pending legislation down in Springfield just to try to clean up some of these holes that exist?
Unfortunately, what we're seeing in terms of legislation, it's going the other way. There was a bill, it was withdrawn, but there was a bill that was going to severely limit traffic stops. Police couldn't pull someone over unless they were going at least 20 miles an hour over.
Could
It'd
pull
have
over
to
for
be
speeding unless it
a
was 20
misdemeanor.
over.
You know, and there was the police chiefs, and the sheriff's association came out very strongly against it. Unfortunately, that legislator withdrew the law, but we are seeing all kinds of bills that have been proposed in the past month that just, they're not good. So it's always difficult to get something passed in Springfield. But we try, and we're going to continue trying. I still think there will be some changes, maybe not this year, because what I'm hearing is that there's not going to be a lot happening this year, maybe because of the election. But hopefully, next year, we can get some of these fixes.
We're trying, John, because that's the one committee I try to keep myself mostly devoted to Naperville, because there's enough work here to keep me busy. But Illinois Chiefs has a legislative committee. And to me, that's where I want to have an impact, is to advocate for laws that are going to keep our community safe. So I'm hearing the same thing. I'm just on the committee. I'm not the chair or vice chair. And the chair or vice chair, they said the same thing. It just doesn't seem like this year there's a ton of appetite for that, at least just yet.
Do you think there's a reason why what seems so obvious and common sense is not being instituted versus the people that are changing things that make it worse? It doesn't even, what you presented today seems so obvious to make those changes. You would think that everybody would just jump on board. What's holding that back?
Why are you looking at me?
Look, it's complicated, but it's a very diverse state, and there are very diverse views of criminal justice. There's no better way to answer it. There are many who think that the laws should be a lot tougher, and there's many on the other side who think the laws are already too tough, that we punish people too harshly.
Hey, John, can I add something?
You know,
I think I would be remiss to say if there weren't bad incidents in policing that have occurred, right? I mean, I'll own it, and I sit here as a proud police officer and would never trade what I've done. What nobody's looking at is that's like the 0.001%. And rather than maybe making stronger accountability laws for bad, I told you earlier, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. Ron, can I pick it, right? Agreed? That, in my opinion, was the way and is the way to deal with that. But because these bad incidents that gain the national news or local news, it's that broad, like we have to do all these things rather than drilling down to, let's put more accountability on police or prosecutors or anybody that has, listen, we have the ability to take people's freedom away, right? Like that's a huge, and I say that to my cops, or take a life if it's warranted within law. That's a huge responsibility bestowed on an individual. So put the accountability on that piece of the job rather than sweeping changes of laws. That's what I think there is some reaction to that. It's speculate. You're asking me to answer a speculative question, but you have to call out the elephant in the room. There's some bad things that police have been part of. But again, if you look at how many incidents police respond to across the country in a year, and you look at those, and one of those is too many. Please let me say that. One bad policing incident is too many. I'll tell you that all day. But I don't know that the answer is to change legislation to do that. It's let's focus on what that problem is, and is there something in the training of police or in the accountability of police that we can look at more than changing some of these laws? I mean, do you think that's
Yeah, absolutely.
I bet any one of my tops would say the same thing I said.
And, you know, what you see and what you have seen in this county is in those instances where we have seen police do something against the law, there is a response. And they're held accountable. And nobody likes to see it, but to me, that's always been the narrative that we've tried to put out to the public is, hey, to kind of paraphrase what the chief said, no one likes a bad cop. They're held accountable just like anybody else, and I think that is important to show the community. But one, officer committing an act of misconduct doesn't always justify changing the law that affects everyone throughout the state. And unfortunately, you see this knee-jerk reaction. A lot of times, something bad happens, oh, we got to change the law. There was a case, kind of unrelated, but related, in Lake County, where the police were questioning a juvenile, and I think he had asked for an attorney. They kept questioning him. He ended up getting charged. He sat in custody for a while, and ultimately they had to release him. Well, now that's resulted in a bill that's in Springfield right now, where anyone under 18, you can't question them unless they have an attorney present. And no attorney is going to allow the police to question their client. So in essence, it will forbid the police from questioning anyone under 18. That's just an example of the knee-jerk reaction. There was one bad incident, but there's no need for legislation that affects the entire state. And unfortunately, that's just how laws are created and changed oftentimes.
That's a nationwide thing. That's not just
Yeah.
unique to Illinois.
You stay on top. Wow.
It's, we've got a staff that's paying attention to everything coming out of Springfield, and we meet, we have a legislative committee, our state's attorneys do, and we meet every Friday when the General Assembly's in session, and we go through all these bills. And a lot of times, some of us will have to go down to Springfield and testify, either for or against something, or work with the General Assembly to make changes so there's some compromise that everybody can live with. It's just, it's a complicated process, you know? But let me just say this, because I know we're running out of time. Despite everything here, we live in a very safe county. We really do. And fortunately, we've got the best police out there. We're extremely professional. We do things the right way. We're all very well funded. And that's a testament to all of you and the people who live in this county because they value public safety. And that in our great schools are the reasons why people want to live here. And I always say you can't have one without the other. You can't have safe communities if you don't have great schools. You can't have great schools if you don't have safe communities. So don't be scared by this. We're actually making a lot of progress. But overall, especially compared to everyone else, DuPage County is a very safe place. And obviously Naperville's in Will County too. And I can speak for that portion of Naperville. It's very safe down there too.
Glasgow's.
Jim Glasgow, he shares my philosophy.
I'll just dovetail. First of all, thanks for all your support because the community has been great supporters of the department. Everybody wants a safe community and we want the same thing. And the crime number thing, I mean, I have some stats. We're done. To Bob's point, probably the biggest crime we have in Naperville that falls in that serious realm are burglaries, whether that's a break into a business or a residence. In the 90s, we averaged 300 to 400 burglaries a year, the 90s. The last 3 years, it's 92, 82, 111. We went up a little bit in 2023. Robberies have stayed the same almost the whole time over the 30 years. I bring that up. Now, the guns coming to town, never seen anything like it in my 23 years. So that, if you say, well, Chief, you're telling us crime's down, but you showed us guns are up, that concerns the heck out of me. You're asking my concern. But in terms of crime, because I hear a lot, hey, Naperville's not as safe as it used to be. You know, the 90s were this, and that crime, that one crime is the one I point out, 300 to 400 in the 90s, 111 last year. So there's some perspective and some context, which I think is, again, doesn't always make everybody happy to hear that number, but data has no emotion. And I like to put that out there like that.
For an average individual, is there anything you'd recommend? Like I put cameras at my office, I put cameras at my home, learn how to shoot, get taught how to handle a gun or how to shoot.
Yeah.
Everybody in my neighborhood, I learned, has a gun. We did have a break-in recently at the end of the block, which made everybody pretty nervous.
in Santa Maria.
Yeah. But is that, I mean,
You did the biggest thing that I see, and if you've read anything that I've said in the press, goes back to the see something, say something. I say all the time, and I hear from you all, not this group specifically, but the community, oh, we didn't want to call you. We saw this car and we didn't want to bother you. So if you've heard me say this before, I apologize. You're probably hearing it. We are paid to be bothered. You need to call us. No one knows your neighborhoods or your business areas better than you all. You're spending the time there. So give us a behavior of like, hey, I see it. Do any of you sit in your own cars parked on the street for long stretches of time on your own? Like, I'll tell you right now, that was a burglary crew. That person was specifically targeted. Unfortunately, the Asian population has been heavily targeted for burglaries because of how they keep valuables in the home. I will guarantee you there was pre-surveillance done by all our organized burglary crews are doing pre-surveillance to find the right. So when you see those suspicious cars, call us. Let us go out there. If it turns out to be nothing, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. That's what we're paid to do. But when you do see that, call us. So I would say, please call us. You're never a bother. That's what you're paying us to do. I love the cameras. I love the Ring doorbells. That all helps us too. It creates leads. You already heard me say that we've never had, but call us too.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. The information has been outstanding today, and I want to thank you so very much. And you guys as well. There's one other thing I think that you can do as a citizen is please contact your elected officials. That's who they want to hear from. So if you have a concern, or in this case, Safety Act had so much bad press going into it. The fact that violent criminals cannot get out on bond, that's a huge win. So, you know, understanding that there is good to it, but if you have major concerns, you have to talk to the people who pass the laws. So please figure out, if you don't know already, who your legislators are and talk to them as well. So thank you again. This has been truly outstanding. Have a wonderful afternoon.